Okay, this is really exciting message that I'm so hoping that you get this, that you bear with us throughout this message, guys. We're going through some deep concepts here in this video, in this channel. And we're going to go over something. We've shared this before, but we're going to go over it again. The first resurrection. When Christ comes in the clouds. The Son of Man is going to come in the clouds. He's going to separate the sheep from the goats, okay? It's deep and it's simple at the same time. So when we go to Hebrews chapter 6, if you look at Hebrews chapter 6, it says, verse 1, "Therefore, leaving the principles of doctrine of Christ, let us go into perfection, not laying again the foundation of repentance from dead works, and of faith towards God, of doctrines of baptism, on laying on of hands, and of the resurrection of the dead, and eternal judgment." So the things we're going over in this video are the basics. There's a resurrection, okay? You can see clearly it's talking about the resurrection. It's talking about the eternal judgment. And that's what we're talking about in this message. So, many of you have asked, why are you talking about the Antichrist? Why are you talking about the little horn? Well, if you actually understand prophecy, you would be very, very excited. Because apocalypse means revealing. It's the revealing of Jesus Christ. It's the revealing of Jesus Christos, Alpha and Omega, the first and the last, the Aleph and the Tav, and the Ancient of Days. He said he will come in the Father's name. So, let's get right into the scriptures. But as we do, if you're watching this and you come across points where you're confused, okay? Don't stay confused. Don't stay, okay? Rewind the video, go back a few points, and then pick up where we were. Go through it again. Go through it again. Go through it again until you see and understand clearly. Because we're going to work quickly. We're going to go through deep concepts. But you can see from Hebrews 6 that the resurrection of the dead, the eternal judgment, these are the most basic principles of the doctrines of Christ. Now here we are in Daniel chapter 7 and verse 8, "Behold, I consider the horns, and behold, there came up a little horn." Okay? "The horn from the tree were plucked, and this horn with eyes of a man, the mouth speaking great words." Donald Trump, right? Then verse 9, "I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, whose hair of his head was as pure wool, and his throne was a fiery flame." Let's make a note of what we're seeing here. We can see, "I beheld till thrones." Now, if we actually look at the Hebrew, we can see the thrones were actually set in place. But what's our first key word here is thrones, right? So let's make note of each thing we see happening. And these are our key notes as we go through Revelation. Okay, so we had thrones set. And then we had a garment white as snow. So white, snow. Right? And he had hair as wool. Okay? And then it talks about his throne, fiery flame. Okay? So then we have thrones, plural, but then we have his throne. Okay? So we're making note of these things because these are important things for us to understand as we look at what's going on here. Who is this? What's taking place? What is the judgment? And then we can see a fiery stream came forth from before him. Thousands ministered to him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. Okay? So now we have another important point. We have 10,000, say 10K times 10K stood before him. Okay, 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. And what did it say? The judgment said, it says the books were open. All right, now let's pay attention to all these important notes, because we'll see throughout Revelation where these actually take place. So we have thrones, we have white as snow, hair as wool, a throne, 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, and the books open. Now here we are in Revelation chapter 1, and then in verse 13, in the midst of the seven golden candlesticks stood one like the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, with a golden girdle. His head and his hairs were white like wool, white as snow. So remember, okay, now we have our white as snow, hair as wool. Okay? Thus connecting this person here with Daniel chapter 7, verse 9, clearly. Okay? Now let's keep going. As we are in Revelation, let's go to the next chapter. So here in Revelation chapter 4, we can see John was taken in the Spirit, and we see a throne. Okay, so before we had a throne. So we have a throne set in heaven. And then around about the throne were 24 seats, and upon the seats were 24 elders. Okay, remember before we saw thrones. So this is a judgment taking place here. Okay. And then we see the one like a lamb. Well, we can see some of the things that we saw here. Now if we go to chapter 5, and we look at chapter 5, verse, go to 11. And here we see the ones ministering to him. Behold, I heard the voice of many angels round about the throne, and the living creatures, and the elders, and the number of them was 10,000 times 10,000. Thousands of thousands, okay? So again, these are the ones ministering that we saw in Daniel chapter 7, verse 9. Now this is the part I really encourage you to take your time and follow along. In this part you may have to go over a few times. Now, we're here in Revelation chapter 20 and verse 1. And it says, I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit, and a great chain in his hand, and he laid a hold on the dragon, the old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. So what just took place is we had Armageddon in chapter 19. Then we have the dragon, the old serpent, the devil, the Satan, which is all the same person, is incarcerated 1,000 years. And cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal upon him that he should deceive the nations no more till what? 1,000 years. This is the millennium. Okay? So after Armageddon, Satan is bound, the devil is bound 1,000 years until the 1,000 years shall be fulfilled. After that, he will be loosed for a little season. Now, verse 4, I saw thrones. Okay? Again, remember our thrones? I saw thrones. And they that sat upon them, judgment was given to them. Okay, so these are the ones sitting in the order of the 24 elders. Okay, now, we're not going to read all this, but let's go continue on verse 4. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. Okay, so they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. This is the millennium. So the same period the dragon is incarcerated in the bottomless pit, you can see 1,000 years. Then you have these people sitting on thrones 1,000 years. Now, the next verse, okay, you can see verse 5. But the rest of the dead live not again until the 1,000 years were fulfilled. So during this period, during this 1,000 years, there are people that will die. And it says they live not again until the 1,000 years, or the millennium is finished. Now, the Bible, you can see, has chapters and verses. Okay? Chapters and verses. Now, these are not, John didn't write these. These are added later. But the person that put verse 5 added to it these words. This is the first resurrection. But what happens is when you first read this, you say, okay, the rest live not dead again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. There's a period here. There's a separation. This first resurrection is not at the end of the 1,000 years. It's before it. This is the first resurrection right here. Blessed and holy is he that has part in the first resurrection. On such the second death has no power. And they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. So the ones that are part of the first resurrection are in the 1,000 years. Can you see that? The thrones, they reigned with Christ 1,000 years. Okay, 1,000 years they're priests unto Christ, and they shall reign with him. So the first resurrection happens before the 1,000 years. Okay, so this is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he that has part in the first resurrection. Now, then what we have is, and when the 1,000 years are expired, okay, so at the end of the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. Now, we could see before that the rest of the dead live not again until the 1,000 years were finished. So that means people are living in the millennium that will die. Now, when they die, they're also going to be judged. They're going to be judged when Satan is loosed out of his prison. Okay? And he shall go out to deceive the nations which are on the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, and gather them together to the battle, and the number of them is as the sand of the sea. So the people that didn't believe in Christ during the millennium are going to be deceived by Satan. So they're going to be judged at the end of the millennium. Okay? That's what Ezekiel chapter 38 is talking about. It's Gog and Magog. That's what's going to happen, guys. It's at the end of the millennium. And they went up from the breadth of the earth, encompassed the camp of the saints about. And the beloved city, the same fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. Verse 10. And the devil which deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever. Now, the reason the devil was put into the bottomless pit before over here, the bottomless pit, is because that's temporary. That's only for the 1,000 years. The lake of fire of brimstone is eternal. This is eternal judgment. There's no coming out of this. Okay? So the devil goes temporarily to a place 1,000 years into the bottomless pit. He comes out, he deceives the people, and then he goes into the lake of fire with the beast and the false prophet, and shall be tormented day and night forever. Okay? Now, let's remember Daniel chapter 7. And don't worry, guys, we're going to go over this again. We're going to repeat, we're going to rehash, we're going to show you this in multiple ways. We'll chart it out. This is a lot of information, I understand. But let's remember our words, okay? We saw the thrones, the one white as snow, hair as wool. The throne set. Now 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, and the books were open. So that we can see right here in verse 11. I saw a great white throne, and him sat upon it. From the face of the whole earth and of heaven they fled away, and there was no place for them. Okay? And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were open. Okay, remember what it said. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, and the books were open. Verse 13, the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead. Okay, now death and hell is all the people that lived before this judgment, before this time. Okay, so this is describing the resurrection. The sea gave up the dead which were in it. Death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them, and they were judged every man according to their works. Now again, death and hell were cast into the lake of fire, which is the second death. Now, the lake of fire is where we see Armageddon. So we're in Revelation 19. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and the armies were gathered together to make war against him that sat upon the horse and against his army. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet, which wrought miracles. Both of these were cast into the lake of fire. burning with brimstone. So the lake of fire is eternal. We saw that's where the devil goes after the 1,000 years. There's no coming out of that. So death and hell are cast into that lake of fire. Okay? And the beast and the false prophet go into the lake of fire. So that is giving us a time of the lake of fire with Armageddon and the lake of fire. Okay, here with the white throne. Now, it's important we talk through what's going on, okay? It's important for you to understand that when God created Adam and Eve, when God created mankind, they were never supposed to die, okay? He gave them two trees, one of the tree of life, which is eternal life, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which brought in death. So, the human being consists of a spirit, soul, and body, okay? Now, in order to face the judgment, God never designed death, okay? So we're eternal beings like angels, okay? So when we face the judgment, even though the physical body dies, okay, that physical body, doesn't matter where it is, if it's cremated, whatever happened, has to be restored back to the soul and spirit to face the judgment. So that's why it's talking about here the dead and the sea, coming out from, all these places, because the actual dust that we came from has to be connected to the soul and the spirit in the judgment day. So that is the resurrection. Okay? Now, you may not know this. This is all basic stuff, guys. This is not deep concept. This is the basics of the resurrection. We are eternal beings. We must face the judgment with our bodies. Okay? Now, we can see that the resurrection here, okay, you have death and hell, okay? You have the books being open. So the resurrection, here described as the first resurrection, is the just and the unjust, the righteous and the wicked. They both face judgment in the resurrection. That's right. It doesn't matter who you are. Everyone, if you died, you must be restored to your body to face the judgment. Let's look at John chapter 5. Here in John chapter 5, let's actually start with verse 24. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that heareth my word and believeth on him that sent me has everlasting life. It's through Jesus Christ. And shall not come into condemnation, but is passed from death into life. That's the gospel of Jesus Christ. By faith in him, you pass from death into life. Verse 25. Verily, verily, I say unto you, the hour is coming, and now is, when the dead shall hear the voice of the Son of God, and they that hear shall live. So the voice, the day of his voice, the shout and the voice of the archangel, and the dead in Christ will rise first. That's what this is talking about. Verse 26. For as the Father has life in himself, so has he given to the Son to have life in himself, and has given him authority to execute judgment, and also because he is the Son of Man. So he is the Son of God and Son of Man. Marvel not at this, for the hour is coming in which all that are in the grave shall hear his voice, and shall come forth, that they what they have done good unto the resurrection of life, and they that have done evil unto the resurrection of damnation. So you can see, this is clearly the resurrection. The resurrection is of the resurrection of life and the resurrection of damnation. Those that have done good, those that have done evil. Okay? This is all the same point. When the voice of the Son of God, and they that hear him shall live. Now let's go to Daniel chapter 12, and let's remember, we heard the resurrection is the just and the unjust, right? Well, Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, at that time Michael shall stand up, that great prince, the great prince which stands for the children of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never since there was a nation. Even at the same time, at that time, the people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found, what? Written in the book. Let's remember our notes. We saw the books opened. Okay? So this is the time the books are open, found written in the book, and many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake unto everlasting life. and some to shame unto everlasting contempt. Okay? So, this is the resurrection. It's life and the just and the unjust. And they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they shall turn many to righteousness as the stars forever. But thou, Daniel, shut up the words and the seal of the book in the time of the end, for many shall run to and fro. So, these are those that have glorified bodies. So we can see a connection with the resurrection, just, unjust, and the glorified bodies. We'll look at that in just a moment. But some of this you may say, no, Leland, you're wrong. Keep in mind, some of this we would not actually understand until the times of the end. It says it right here, but thou, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book. The same book has been available for, 2,500 years. But the time of the end is when it's understood. That's when the seal is open, when the Lamb opens the seal. When the Lamb opens the seal, now we can understand these things. The resurrection, those found written in the book. Now we're here in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, and we can see, for we know that our earthly house of this tabernacle were dissolved. We have a building of God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. So this is talking about the resurrection of our earthly house from death into everlasting life, the glorified body, our tabernacle, right? For we are confident, okay? Now let's pay attention here. For we are confident and say that willing we rather be absent from body and be present with the Lord. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone may receive the things done in his body according that he has done, whether it be good or evil. So this is the resurrection, good or evil. But you can see we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ. And you see the connection with the resurrection. But again, the resurrection is the just and unjust. Here in Acts chapter 24 and verse 15, and we have hope towards God, which they themselves also allow, that there shall be a resurrection of the dead, both the just and the unjust. So the resurrection is both the just and the unjust, and it happens at the same time. Resurrecting the body, death and hell, will give up those in it for the judgment. Okay, this is a lot of information, so let's take a moment. Let's pause, take a step back, and review what we've gone over. So we can see first off that there is a millennium, 1,000 years, okay? So we've drawn that millennium here in yellow, a 1,000-year period. Now, we saw that there is a point. We have the apocalypse. We have the apocalypse on this side. And we had a point by which we could see Armageddon. We could see the lake of fire described, right? And this is the beginning of the millennium here, okay? But at this, you have Armageddon, and then we saw the devil. He was bound in the bottomless pit for this 1,000-year period, right? Then, at the end of this period, then we had Gog-Magog. We have the Gog-Magog war at the end of the 1,000 years, and the devil is loosed from the bottomless pit, causing this war. So it said, those that live not again until the 1,000 years were finished. So the dead, or they're judged at this war, Gog-Magog, when the devil is loose. So they go to war against the Lamb, against the people of God, okay? So that we could see clearly. Now, we know that the coming of the Son of Man in the clouds, that happens in the apocalypse, in the revealing, all right? And we can now see that this is the first resurrection. The first resurrection and the judgment must take place before we enter the millennium. So the judgment takes place before we enter this reign of Christ, 1,000 years. That's when the first resurrection comes. So now we can see that the white throne judgment is clearly the first resurrection. These are the same. Okay? And the first resurrection we saw, it was death and hell, cast up the dead. So all of those are judged here. Okay? Now let's look at the coming of the Son of Man in the clouds. This expression we see in Matthew 24. So let's go to Matthew 24. In Matthew 24, verse 30, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. Then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Now, we've shown you this before about the sign of the Son of Man, the coming of the Son of Man, and the sign of the Son of Man when he comes with the voice of the archangel. Okay, the voice of the archangel in this order. We won't go into this now, but we've talked about that before. So we have the sign of the Son of Man. Now, we must realize that at this point, the revelation continues. And we have the sound, the voice of a trumpet. And they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven. So what do we have? A trumpet. Okay? The sound, the voice of a trumpet. Now, as it continues here, it talks about the days of Noah. Okay? So this is all continuing from that point, is a progressive revelation. And the days of Noah. So they were eating, drinking, marrying, and they knew not the flood came, and they took them away. So also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. There shall be two in the field. One shall be taken, the other left. There shall be two grinding at the mill. One shall be taken, the other left. So these are the ones taken at the coming of the Son of Man. He will gather together his elect. So this is all the same thing. Now you say, who are the ones taken? Well, it continues. Okay? The faithful and wise servant. Blessed is that servant. Okay? So now this is continuing, guys. 25:1. 10 virgins. 5 were wise, 5 were foolish. Okay, this is all the same thing. Then as it continues, we have talents. Okay, the one he gave 5 talents, 1, 2, 1, 1. Okay, this is all a continuation. Then we get to verse 31 of Matthew 25. And when the Son of Man shall come in glory, and his holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of glory. This is the white throne judgment right here, guys. So all this is happening. Everyone's being judged. The servants. Who is the faithful and wise servant? Who is the wise virgin? Okay? All of this is happening. Then what happens is the nations are brought before him. Okay? And before him shall be gathered all nations. He shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divides the sheep from the goats. Now these are not just nations, this is the resurrection. The resurrection had those that did good, those are the sheep. Okay, they had those that did evil, those are the goats. And he shall set the sheep on his right hand and his goats on the left. So this is the resurrection when he sits on the throne. The resurrection is the white throne. Then shall the king say unto those at his right hand, Come, ye blessed of my Father, to inherit the kingdom prepared for you. This is the millennium from the foundation of the world. So, for time's sake, we're not going to read this whole thing, but I encourage you to read the whole parables to get the understanding. But what we're seeing is that clearly this is the judgment. And these shall go, now these are the goats, and these shall go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous unto life eternal. Okay, so this is the lake of fire, the everlasting punishment, and the righteous into life eternal. That is the millennium. We judged. Well, we showed you in the other video, guys, the tree of life. Now, how we know one from another is the fruits. What fruit are we bearing? He said you would know them by their fruits. Okay, we showed you that he is availed to those that overcome the tree of life with 12 manner of fruits. Okay, so he said, I am the vine, you are the branches, and he that bears much fruit. Okay, we need to bear fruit. He that does not bear fruit is cast into the fire. Now, if we go to Matthew chapter 12, we can see this same thing. Either make the tree good and his fruit good. So we have either good fruit, or else the tree corrupt and his fruit corrupt. A tree is known by its fruit. O generation of vipers, how can you, being evil, speak good things? Wow. For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Guys, take care of be careful what you're saying with comments. Be careful of attacking. You're making it clear who you are, this generation of vipers. For a good man out of his good treasure of his heart brings forth good things. An evil man out of his evil treasure brings forth evil things. But I say unto you that every idle word that man shall speak, they shall give account thereof in the day of judgment. So be careful. For by your words are you justified, and by your own words are you condemned. Now, another thing we found that was quite interesting is that the millennium, of course, is 1,000 years, but we found that a type of that millennium is expressed in 10 days. So we saw to one of the churches that the devil was cast into prison 10 days, okay? And it said a trial period. So there's a trial period of 10 days that we can find throughout the feast. So for example, on the first day of the 7th month, Yom Teruah, you have 10 days. And then you have Yom Kippur, and you blow the trumpet, okay? And then you have, after the trumpet is blown, you have the Feast of Tabernacles, okay? So we see this time period between Yom Teruah. Actually, the trumpet is also blown here. We have judgment. We have Yom Kippur, judgment time, where the books are open, okay? Trumpet's blown again, and then we have tabernacles. Well, we find the same thing. We just work backwards. When we go to the first month, it was Joshua that blew the trumpet after Passover. So now we're going backwards 10 days. So after Passover, Passover is the 14th day of the first month, but it was on the 10th day of the first month you would present the lamb. And then you go backward 10 days, and Moses set up the tabernacle. So let's just show you this on the calendar. Okay, you have the Yom Teruah here, the first day of the 7th month. Then you have 10 days till the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. Judgment, 10 days. Okay, so that 10 days is like the millennium. Okay, then you have tabernacles. Tabernacles is New Jerusalem. Okay, and that's what you can see in Revelation 21 and 22, tabernacles. Okay, so that's that millennium, the type of that period. And we have another 10 days in the first month. In the first month, what we were describing is Joshua kept the Feast of Passover. And after that Feast of Passover, he blew 7 trumpets. So he blew 7 trumpets. Now we're going backwards 10 days. Okay, so we go backwards 10 days, and there was a day you present the lamb, okay, in your house on the 10th day of the first month. Well, those 10 days, if we go back, the first day of the first month, Moses set up the tabernacle. Okay, that's New Jerusalem. We enter New Jerusalem after the 1,000 years. So, this is a lot of information. I know a lot of you struggle with the calendar, but for anyone that is interested, I thought that was amazing and wanted to share. So, what have we learned? The millennium. Okay, we have this time period, and it is at the end of that millennium we have a new heavens, a new earth, in New Jerusalem. This is tabernacles. New Jerusalem. But we learn in the millennium, okay, the white throne judgment is the coming of the Son of Man in the clouds. This is the first resurrection. This is all the same thing. And this is the revealing, the apocalypse of Jesus Christ. So, the judgment, the separation of the sheep from the goats, the resurrection of the just and the unjust, it happens before we enter the millennium. It happens in the revealing of Jesus Christ. He will come and he will judge all. And then it will be the righteous that will enter this millennial period. So we saw that it's the just and the unjust. We saw that they will hear the voice of the Son of God. We know in 1 Thessalonians 4, there will be a great shout, a voice of the archangel. Okay? It will be the gathering of the elect from the 4 winds. Okay? So this is the white throne judgment. Guys, if this is a lot of information and it's hard to understand, I'm making this as simple as possible, but this white throne judgment, this happens here. We have another video on this, on the white throne judgment, which if this is difficult to understand, watch that other video. We go over very similar things. We go over a little bit more information. This is just recap. However, this is what this channel is all about. It is about showing in the revealing of the Mashiach. Okay, the Mashiach, the Messiah, the coming of the Son of Man, the revelation, the revealing, the apocalypse of the Son of Man. Okay, he's coming. He's going to sit on a throne in glory, and he's going to judge. He's going to separate the sheep from the goats, the just from the unjust. He's going to judge, okay? And many will say, no, he will not judge me. Yes, all must appear before the judgment seat of Christ. So this is part of a playlist on the throne of the Son of Man. The King will sit in glory and judge. So I encourage you to watch the playlist. This is, I think, video number 35. Okay. So thanks for watching. And seriously, look at this information. Study. Spend some time. Work through it to understand. Okay. And I bless you in your studies. Watch and pray that you be accounted worthy to escape all these things. Amen.